What is up, sports fans? My name is Jake Azuski. You can call me Jake Iggy or Iggy for short. And this is Iggy Sports Talk. So I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to episode 44 of Iggy Sports Talk. And today I have a very special guest on the show with me. His name is Kenny Pordon. He is a former league marketing director for the XFL and also a former manager of market strategy for the NFL. So how's it going, Kenny?
Great. No, it's I'm happy to be here. Jake or Iggy or I'd be best
Either
to
one.
call you, I guess Jake I'll go with. And I'm just excited to receive your questions and just be able to enlighten your audience. My experience has been, within the sports industry, where I've been, where I'm going, and just very excited to speak with you and really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually like to start these conversations, kind of going over sort of what happened in 2020. And obviously it was a very unprecedented time for a lot of people. It was a very struggling time for not only people around the country, but people around the world. And something that I usually like to talk about with my guests is, shining light on the positives of 2020. So if you could sort of come up or think of what was the best moment or a great experience that happened in 2020 that you're gonna think back on and really appreciate?
Yeah, I think for the benefit I had in 2020, which is probably a benefit a lot of people sitting in my seat had as well, is unfortunately it came to April and the XFL decided to go into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. All the operating staff was laid off. So all of a sudden I get up, on April 10th, and that day I'm annoyed. So now you're dealing with that reality set in the middle, to your point, of a global pandemic. And I think what this time period is really pretty is the ability to go wide rather than deep. And I'll characterize that in kind of an example, right? If I was working at NFL, I'm very deep in what are the issues facing my particular company or my particular role or my department, right? So you're getting very deep in solving problems that are coming up that you're trying to look for solutions for. I think you've seen a great job by what the NFL has been able to do just this past year and completing a season for it's really MLB, NHL, and NBA all being able to crown champions, all having very, very limited amount of issues considering what they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. But that's going deep. It's, challenges that you're faced with the pandemic as a single entity. I think by me saying going wide is I've been able to look at this across hundreds of companies. So, how is Madison Square Garden dealing with? How is the NFL dealing with Major League Baseball? How are media companies like iHeartMedia and SiriusXM and Spotify, right? So I've been able to talk to a ton of different professionals from across sports and media and really getting a sense of how this is impacting their day-to-day, their strategic outlook on the future too. So, for me, I think that has been something that will be extraordinarily valuable to me. And then also just having the time, different courses and really being able to study things that are marketing. I took a lot of, learning paths through LinkedIn Learning and doing marketing. But now, before I got on this podcast, I'm learning about supply chain management. Now, am I ever going to use that, as much day to day as a marketer? Maybe not. But just having that perspective, because I'm to study and study wide, I think will help me now when I get back into a position where I am going to be working, in marketing, most likely for my next organization. A lot of times when you're in business, it's very easy to get kind of, surrounded with the day to day. And very much that was my experience at the XFL. Like, you something to get your head above water because there's so many logistics and so many different things that you're trying to handle on a day-to-day basis and information flow and everything that you need to do to be a real accomplished professional. But I think what was valuable about 2020 for me is it gave me the ability to kind of take that 30,000 foot view and just see how, the working and really getting an understanding of what is going to be important in my next role and making sure I have the skills to really excel there. So I feel like I've been very fortunate to take a step back and be able to groom some skills that are going to really, serve me well as I go into my next position and as I go, my career.
Yeah, I think Kenny, that's the perfect route that you could have gone, and because with the downtime that everybody really had, I think a lot of people went in a similar route of trying to take advantage of the downtime, trying to take advantage of the circumstances instead of, looking at it negatively and being like, why am I in this situation? Why is this happening to me? When no, it's actually happening to the entire world. And I feel like, it must have been interesting for you to talk to these different companies or these different professionals around the industry, because I mean, at least just from what I saw from the outside and, from talking to different people that I know, there's a lot of people that were like, wait, I can't go in the office. How is this going to work? I'm going to have to really run a business over Zoom and, have to go on my computer and, sit in my desk with my kids running around or, all these distractions around me. Like, how is that going to work? So, it must have been interesting to hear from other professionals, like I said, and really hear about their experiences trying to scramble around and, trying to figure out how to really go through this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, especially in the sports business, but also in the media business, is that you're planning on an annual cycle, especially it's a seasonal business. So,
Right.
Everything is baseline. You're going to have a season. It's going to start at this time. It's going to end at this time. And for the most part, throughout, it's all something like baseball has been around for more than 100 years, more than 150 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically been around the same schedule forever. So, able to know kind of when the season's going to start, roughly when it's going to end. And every single decision you're making, if you're selling tickets for, in the New York market, the people I've talked to at the end, used to a season starting, late March, early April and ending in September, and maybe, luckily having postseason games that take you into October. So your sales cycle is built on that in theory, right? Now, all of a sudden you're told, okay, well, we can't sell any games for this year. And it's very touching here, and we're not able to even tell people what capacity is. So what you've been seeing a lot of teams do is reinvest in their brands, reinvest in their relationships, B2B and B2C, and just letting people know, like, we value you, right? And I think a lot of people I talked to on the sales side was just building relationships for months until they had a better sense of where their inventory was going to be. And even now, you look at, in the New York market, which is mostly where I've talked to people here, just because I'm based in New York, the Madison Square Garden with the Knicks and Rangers, to the Nets, to the Devils and Islanders. And Islanders has been a little bit of a different situation since they're kind of closing out Nassau this year and then starting at the end of this year. But definitely for the other four franchises, it's been challenging because they don't have any inventory to go sell. Like, these games and they don't know when they're going to be able to have any sort of indoor capacity. So they're trying to come up with systems where the minute that they get the go ahead from government officials, somebody in your building, they have a list of people to go to. They know who to kind of fill in those inventory slots and be able to, from a very logistics standpoint, just know who they're going to have in a seat. So that's what a lot of what they've been doing is sort of figuring out how they're going to make that work. I think the other piece that's been is like, well, now that you're limited or you could sell, how are you cutting down your resources, right? How are you cutting down, the way you operate and the way you do business? And I think, finding lean, which is why I've been very interested in supply chain management, is very much where business is going. How can we be as lean as possible? How can we have as limited office space as possible? How least amount of people to do the same job? So I think you're going to see a lot more of that efficiency being built in. And even if you have people on your staff, how am I getting the most capacity from this individual person? And I think that's been especially what I've seen a lot on the sales side. But I think just in general in business, that's been something that a lot of businesses are. So I think it's actually been now beneficial for more startups because they're used to working in a lean capacity.
Right.
I think in bigger companies, it probably took a little bit of move at that more efficient pace and understand how to work that way, just because when you're a bigger company, it's sometimes harder to move in that more efficient pace, I should say, in different spaces. And I think they're being forced to do that. They can't rely on the way business has been done without, especially something like sports, which is annual, how to move in a day-to-day and week-to-week capacity, because things change immediately. I mean, look at CBS and Turner. And 2 months ago, NCAA tournament's all going to be in Indianapolis. Well, how do you create efficient resources to make sure that you can produce the tour in a way similar to the past, but just in one location? So I think these are things that are consistently happening in the industry. And you just have to have that flexibility to be successful in solving these business challenges.
Makes sense. And I've noticed like a lot to where, talking to other people that I know, who like work in not predominantly sports, but just business in general, them talking about how they used to go on these trips, 5, 6 times a year. And now people are like, oh, I don't have to send you to, Arizona and, pay for your hotel, pay for your food. Like you can just Zoom those people and get the same exact sort of stuff done. But obviously it was sort of interesting just seeing how, like you talked about, these different leagues tried to figure out how they were going to at least get some way of normalcy, just to get at least, some players on the field and get some entertainment out there, because there's a lot of times obviously that I bet you watch some runoffs of like past Super Bowls, that sort of stuff. That stuff was starting to get old after a few months. But it was definitely interesting, different things that like I didn't really think about that could possibly come up. Even something that happened leading up to the Super Bowl. I don't know if you heard, to where the Chiefs barber got tested positive for COVID, and there was 20 Chiefs players that were in line trying to get a haircut. And that's something that, like, as a sports fan, or even as somebody who works in sports, you don't even really think about those different possibilities, to where, like you said, really anything could happen. And I just remember, when I was watching closely in the MLB, when that happened with the Marlins, just in a snap of a finger, where 20 guys, 14, 20 guys got an outbreak. And it got to a point where the MLB 2 weeks in almost had to shut down. And it must have been interesting for you, especially somebody who works in sports, and especially in the strategy, but sort of thinking, really trying to think about, what sort of decisions or tough decisions these leagues and people really have to go through.
Well, I think a lot of it's prioritization, right? So the priority to play the sport, because that's what the players want. That's what the owners want, because they need product, right? So
Right.
it almost brings you back to a basic, like what sports. It's at the end of the day, it's games played on the field for, that's it. That's what it is. So you go back to basics. How do we get as many games played as possible? So that's where the NFL was, NBA and NHL, of how we get as many games as possible. The next piece of that is, how can we engage fans with our games? I think naturally it was, well, we need these games broadcast. We can't lose that piece, because otherwise, people are following it like it's back in before the days of radio, through just stories, right? And maybe video clips. So it's like, we need obviously a broadcaster. So that's key. So make sure that you have television production crews that can produce games. A lot of innovation there. A lot of play-by-play and color commentators, announce teams, did road games from their home, home stadium, listening to or watching the Mets on SNY here. Like they did literally every single road game. They were doing it from Citi Field, and they would do the home games. More people, to your point, we're looking at that saying, do we really need to send announce teams to road games? Maybe we just do it the same way going forward. So I think, to your point, it did innovation and some conversation as well. But that was key. Now you can, regional sports networks can still charge their same rate to cable providers, or MVPD providers. So that's key. They were able, these leagues, to make good on national broadcasts they have with Turner, with ESPN, with CBS, with Fox, with NBC. So that's a big chunk of money for these individual leagues.
Right.
And that's where it was for this year, because they knew, just looking at COVID, the idea that you're going to have 50,000 fans at a game was just not reasonable. So understanding what you can control, understanding what was, and then maximizing your revenue against those possibilities. Now I think you're seeing that second phase, especially with baseball, which is, how can we get fans back, right? When can we do that? And making sure that that's something that can be achieved. So that is something that, in places like Florida and Texas have had a little bit more success there, fans in the stands. Places like New York and California clearly have not had anybody in the stands. So how across the country can you work with local leaders to make sure that you're getting fans back and giving them a valuable experience, where they're going to want to tell your friends, like, yeah, I went, to a sporting event, and it was great, you should go to the next one. So I think part of where the industry goes over the next year and a half of really getting back to some sort of normalcy. Now, at that standpoint, as you're trying to of normalcy, how can you create further efficiencies in your business for the short term, but also for the long term? And I think that that's something that a lot of leagues have looked at is of how can we, trim costs, or how can we invest in areas that potentially could drive future revenue for us. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens as a lot of these leagues, like the NHL after this season, their deal with NBC is up. So they're looking for a new broadcast home. The NFL broadcast deals are up another year or two. So how are these leagues going to kind of manage these broadcast deals to make sure that they're providing as much value as possible and driving as much revenue as they can from these? At the same time, networks are looking at it saying, okay, what's a fair rate for NFL football? Do I need NFL football in my portfolio? Do I need NBA? Do I need the NHL? What's that right portfolio of assets to be the best network we can be? I think you saw a decision with ESPN deciding to pay MLB less for kind of what they call kind of a co-broadcast, where you have RSNs, have ESPN doing national broadcasts, but RSNs can still do those broadcasts. ESPN's like, unless we get exclusivity for these broadcasts, we're not going to pay for them. Like, we want playoff game baseball, so they're trimming their package and looking at some efficiency there as far as which way they're going to go forward. With those like WWE Network. They decided, hey, instead of selling this ourselves and dealing with acquisition and retention costs and bringing in, marketers and people that are valuable in driving subscriptions, why don't we just, partner with Peacock and get a rights fee and not have to worry about any of those costs or any of those acquisition needs that we would have to if we did something, similar with our own network. Is that a similar decision that NFL Network could look at? I mean, they decide maybe, we're going to partner with an ESPN or a CBS or a Fox or what have you to maybe have that network run by some of those costs they have as well. And then you saw with CBS decided, hey, we're not going to do SEC football anymore. We're going to get out of big time college football and we're going to put those costs someplace else. So I think very interesting to watch over the next year or two within the sports industry.
1000%. It's definitely a very interesting time to work in sports, and especially like for myself coming up into the sports industry. It's very fun. And at least for myself, I'm very interested in the digital space, sort of like how we're being able to be connected digitally and also like social media, because that's something that I grew up with. I remember my freshman year of high school when Snapchat stories came out. But I want to sort of start talking about really your experience coming up through college at Fordham University. You were 4 years as a part of the radio station, and I actually, through my research, I read that you had the opportunity to meet and interview Adrian Peterson during your college experience. If you could just tell that story a little bit, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. It was an opportunity. I literally tell people I got on Fordham on campus on a Sunday. I went through orientation Monday and Tuesday. I started classes and I signed up for the radio station on Friday. And that was my experience in college, which was, part academics, which obviously is always a huge part of the experience. Part of the orientation piece, meeting new people, meeting people within my dorm room, but then the radio station. And I was so fortunate not only just to get theory as far as my coursework and understanding the importance of communications and media as far as connecting people. So having that from a theoretical standpoint, but to take a common core of everything you could think of, from basically astronomy to philosophy to history, and really getting an analysis of my coursework, but at the same time getting practical skills at a radio station, understanding professionally what it takes to be successful in that field. So with that, I was able to be a color commentator for Fordham football, Fordham basketball, do live updates during our music program each and every morning and afternoon, called FUV Music, and to provide sports information and scores and highlights, but also sound bites. And one of the things that was really cool is I got to be a beat reporter reporter, Giants, Mets, and Devils full time, but also got to cover, the Yankees and Knicks as well, as part of my experience. And with that, being able to actually interview players. Like I remember just being able to go up to like Derek Jeter's locker room and like be able to put my microphone there and ask questions, and being able to have that connection with premium athletes and was something that was just an amazing experience. But to understand how to do that professionally, how do you dress professionally? How do you appear professionally when you're, in some of these locker rooms, 18, 19, 20 years old,
Right.
How do you appear, to really be professional and be respected by people in the industry?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the ride to be part of a beat reporting task and doing over 50 games for the 2006 Mets, which lost game 6 to the Cardinals, went on to win the World Series. But to be there in the stadium when Endy Chavez makes a catch that I think was, started to break some of the foundation of Shea before he taken down for Citi Field a few years later. But to feel that passion and energy of fans, and to understand also the media's role and present that information between the ball club and the fans, and the important role the media plays in really being that connector, helped me truly understand the value of what the mission was. But then at the same time, being able to do a 3-hour talk show called One-on-One Sports, where literally every single week, especially during the summer, I'm hosting my own talk show for 3, no different than things that you would hear on WEEI, WIP out in Philadelphia, or WFAN in New York, and really be able to understand what it takes to put that show together, be able to put interviews together with some, really prime sports media figures, but also just some prime general. So one of those shows that you're mentioning was a show that I did live from the NFL draft. And I don't remember if it was my junior year or senior, but I'm pretty sure my senior year that Peterson got drafted. I would have to look back at that. But it was 2007 was my senior year. I think that was his year he got drafted. And he actually swung by, and his agent said, "Hey, we'd love to have you, as part of Radio Row, go on your program." So all of a sudden, I'm sitting next to Adrian Peterson, who is what is the best player in college football.
Right.
And I'm having, one of the first interviews for him with someone that will be, a first ballot Hall of Famer, running backs to ever do it. So just the opportunity, like I said, to interface with, people from sports past, but also sports present and sports future, as it turns out to be. I'm being able to engage them and interview them and really get to understand who they are and what makes them successful, whether it be a media personality or an athlete, helpful for me. And then what was great too was the ability through WFUV and through our executive producer, Bob Aarons. He brought some of the best people in the industry to talk to us and give us advice about the industry. So whether that be Dave Sims, who's the play-by-play announcer for the Seattle Mariners, or Gary Cohen, who's the play-by-play announcer for the New York Mets, just to have these really dignified sports professionals come in and be able to is phenomenal and really helpful for my career. And one of the stories I really love is Kevin Burkhardt. Kevin Burkhardt was someone doing sports updates for Wins and CBS Radio 880, and just kind of doing those 15-20 second updates and a lot of times Kevin would be there for the day games, and the day games are always fun. You have the 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock start on getaway day on like a Thursday afternoon. It wasn't fun dealing with the traffic coming out and trying to get back to the Bronx to upload my sound. But it's amazing to see Kevin at that stage, just starting out, and I could tell there was something special about him just by his work ethic and just by his personality and the way everybody around the media room just loved talking to Kevin. Be the number 2 and potentially someday the number 1 at Fox Sports is just the awesome experience you have at working at FUV and the people I've been able to learn from during my tenure. So I look at it as being very, very fortunate to have gone to school at Pordon for 4 years and to work at WFUV, and everything I do into my career to date, or everything I've done in my career today, and everything I will do in my career, definitely 100%. I'll give kudos to FUV and for Ford putting out that foundation.
Yeah, that's incredible. That must have been like you said, an extraordinary experience for you. It's such a young age, and I can think about myself. If I was put in a position at 21 years old, sitting in front of Trevor Lawrence, in these coming weeks, the great, generational talent, a guy that's supposed to go number one in the draft, and just really trying to get the mindset of Jake, you're not a fan anymore. You're not somebody that just on the side of after your classes does sports reporting and this sort of like this is a job now. Like this is legit. Like I have to act as professional as possible. I have to be a reporter. I have to take those fan sort of jitters or those fan sort of thoughts kind of out of it and be as professional as possible. I bet that must have been sort of a really good learning experience for yourself and something to where sort of the moment of when you were able to interview such a magnitude of a guy and especially at the NFL draft really must have sort of helped prepare you for different sort of situations where you must have been in a difficult sort of situation or a situation where you had a lot of stuff being asked of you, and it must have been really cool also to be able to report for teams like you said, the Mets, the Giants, the Devils, and that sort of brought up another question for me. What were some of the teams that you grew up sort of rooting for throughout your childhood?
Yeah, no, I definitely can answer that question, but I think to go back to kind of where you're previously speaking of, special about WFUV was the institution that was built and
Hmm.
still built there as far as the great broadcasters that have come out of that program and getting on their shoulders. And it starts with the first, which is Vince Scully. So it kind of all goes back
Oh, wow.
to Vince Scully. And, as far as that, it's so, to take Vin's legacy and make sure that that's something that is completely infused in the station. And a lot of what we did is even going back and look at the Brooklyn Dodgers and some of Vin's work there and what he was been able to do throughout his career, starting in Brooklyn all the way through Los Angeles.
Hmm.
It's phenomenal, and obviously he's at the pinnacle of anyone speaking about sports media figures. So when you
1000%.
start with someone like that, part of laying the foundation for FUV, then take it another step, going to Michael Kay, who's the lead play person for the New York Yankees,
Right.
or Mike Breen, who's the lead voice of the NBA but also the lead voice of the New York Knicks, Bob Papa, who's the lead voice on radio, the New York Giants, Chris Carino, who's the lead voice for the Brooklyn Nets.
It's
There's
incredible.
so many great WFUV talent that now is having across the country in play-by-play and
Right.
broadcasting, but also in the New York area. And then you look at nationally, Ryan Rucco, who does WNBA, it's for ESPN, Spiro Ditas, who does NFL on CBS and also NCAA basketball and March Madness on CBS as well, all coming out of WFUV. And we've also had people from the business standpoint, go to the NHL, MLB, myself at the NFL. So we're all kind of rooting for one another to all be successful within the industry. And a lot of us have stayed in the industry, even if we haven't stayed on the broadcasting side of it. And I think that's create a legacy of excellence around what FUV means and what Fordham University means as far as sports
1000%.
media. So I think that to me was always why we were as professional as we were, why we always, wanted to make sure that we were growing what we were doing as a sports department and excelling at and getting better at what we were doing, to make sure that people that were alumni of the station could listen. If they tune in one day, listen, say, you know what, this I'm listening to, or this broadcast I'm listening to really is indicative of the legacy I remember FUVB. And I
Right.
think there's been great work, who's the general manager of the station, all the way down and making sure that sports is still a very integral part in WFUV, and news is the same thing.
Hmm.
News is amazing broadcasters across all the major networks, NPR, et cetera, et cetera. Some major print publications as well, and digital publications. Quality is on the news side as well. So, music it's known for its AAA format and adult album alternative, and really being one of the leaders in the format, and then obviously on the sports and news side. So of that three-legged stool, we've always made sure that the sports side of that is really strong. And I think it's as alumni, every time I see WFUV, get more and more publicity or more and more respect within the radio industry, because it only looks good for you because you've been part of that program. And then now it's like, well, how do I get back to that legacy? How do I become one of those people that when people mention FUV, they're like, oh, wow, Pordon got to start, right? So that's where, that gives you that desire to keep getting better. And definitely during this time period where I've been kind of searching for what my next beat is, it's definitely given me that motivation and fire to make sure whatever I step into next, I'll obviously, do it at an excellent level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think going back to favorite teams growing up, I definitely was a New York sports fan. So the Giants were my favorite team growing up. To cover the Giants, in college, and then be able to, work at the NFL as well was a lifelong dream. And it was a dream job I got right out of school. I started literally 2 days after graduated Fordham, go right to the NFL. So it was an amazing opportunity for me, the age of 5, and really football being the prime sport I was a fan of, was an amazing experience. I think the other sports I kind of was like, I still have teams down and I rooted for, but they're all kind of within New York. I kind of started on more of an Islanders, Nets track, and now I've gone like a Knicks, Yankees, Rangers track. So it's funny they swap the other direction. It's kind of a little bit where I live in the city and friends and other things that have kind of, changed, some of my fandom over the years. I love this city and I love New York sports. Like I can tell you right now, and you have probably a similar experience with WEEI in New England and Boston. WFAN to me is just, if you want to hear the pulse of New York in New York sports, there's kind of two places. There's the New York Post and there's WFAN, and they're the institutions in that. And, being at WFUV and, doing sports talk myself, and obviously leaning a lot on the Daily News and the New York Post for preparing for those. I still have a love of New York sports. It's still what energizes me most. There's nothing better than, a Yankees or Mets run deep in the postseason, or the Rangers making a run, for the Stanley Cup, or the Knicks, if they ever can do it, making a run deep in the playoffs. Like, it's great to see the city get energized and great to see people come together. New York sports fan, and always, root for all 9 teams to do well. It's always good when New York is doing well in sports, and it creates another energy. I think, to me now, looking for my next opportunity, I've been also fortunate to have conversations with people from all 9, major franchises in the city, and get of how they're building out of COVID and how they're going to re-engage with fans as well. So who knows, down the road, maybe that's where one of my next steps is working for a team. I definitely got that love, growing up and following local sports and listening to WFAN, then being able to do sports talk radio and cover team TV, and then being able to see it in multiple markets, working at both the NFL and the XFL. So I really have a love for the local fan. I have a love for that fan who, after a Yankee game, they feel a need to call up talk radio and kind of, let their thoughts be known to a host. And I think that's what's special about sports, because emotional connection that shows people care about what you do in your industry.
Right.
And, the Northeast sports towns, not to put it against any other sports towns, there's great ones across the country, but what's special about, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, there's that passion that you get from those fans and those rivalries that's hard to match anywhere in the country. I know she would probably object to me saying that, and there are great markets as well, and there's others, across the country too, but it's just that Northeast sports fan is something, especially this time of year where the weather is lousy, and it's just great to be able to connect with NFL football, especially now with NBA basketball and NHL hockey in the market. We'll get excited for kind of the stretch run to begin for both the winter sports.
Yeah, I bet you can see it behind me, and sort of, my hat and that sort of stuff. I'm in the same exact boat as you. You know what I mean? Like the Northeast sports, that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm even in this. Why I'm even super interested in working and so passionate about working in the sports industry is the passion really that sports gives me, and I see it come out of other people. It's really the whole feeling of passion and belonging that sports gives to people that really drives and motivates me to continue working hard, to, give people interesting stories to talk about. And, one of the biggest things that like really helps me grow my love for sports is, really seeing the connection that the players and, the fans really sort of have. And it's something where like even a guy who loves the Red Sox as much as I do, I have the utmost respect for Derek Jeter. I have the utmost respect for Mariano Rivera, but if somebody, when I go to Yankee Stadium, I've gone there twice and they haven't played the Red Sox and I hate it there just because, everybody's going, let's go Yankees. And, I'm the Red Sox fan who wears his Red Sox hat at Yankee Stadium because I don't care. And, but I got to tell you,
You're a brave person.
oh yeah, I got to tell you, I went to Citi Field and, quite honestly, it was the second most energetic and sort of incredible atmosphere that I've been around. I've been around to 10 different MLB stadiums, and when I went to Citi Field, the atmosphere around that stadium, it might have been because they were playing the Nationals, a division rival, but every single hit that they got, the whole stadium erupted. And I got to ask you, especially somebody who lives around New York and is really seeing sort of what Steve Cohen is trying to do with the Mets organization, just from the outside. What is your reaction of sort of everything that they're doing? Because they're really secretly building up a contender, and obviously if they got Bauer, they would be World Series favorites right now. But sort of from what you've seen, through your time in New York before, throughout the last 20 years, and what you've seen sort of in this short stretch of when Steve Cohen has been the owner, what difference have you really seen just in the aurora of like Mets fans?
Yeah, no, there's definitely an energy in the city in general. And I think I can go back to 2000 in New York City, that's the city of winners, right? We're used to winning, right? Since 2000, you have basically two Yankees championships, 2000, 2000, two Giants championships, 2000 and 2011. And then, the Devils are kind of on the fence. Are they New York sports? Are they kind of Philadelphia sports? They kind of, they kind of reach a lot in Jersey and Jersey between the two markets. So it tends to be more New York sports. But the last time they won was 2002, 2003. So I think if I have my math right, that New York has won 5 championships years, which is, when you have 9 teams, is unbelievable, the ineptitude that New York has shown. And then I think other than that, like the Rangers made the Stanley Cup Finals once in 2014, the Mets obviously in 2015, and the Yankees had made the World Series as well in 2003 against the Marlins. So there's been appearance, but there hasn't been that collective sense of winning in New York like there was in the 90s, obviously, right. With the Yankees and with the Mets being good. So this is the first time probably that both teams will be really good at the same time. And what you have to understand about New York is, league city at times, because the Giants were the first team here. So the Giants and Dodgers were here, and then kind of the Yankees didn't get really their start of being a great team until obviously Babe Ruth came in. And so that kind of was the 100 years of dominance for the Yankees, and they've become the establishment team in the market. But there's still a lot of love for National League Baseball. And the way New York works, it's so big. There's kind of Long Island and New Jersey. New Jersey tends to be more Yankees territory because it's close to the Bronx and close to Yankee Stadium. And Long Island's mostly Mets territory. And then Brooklyn, just 2 of the boroughs in New York are Mets territory. Staten Island is sort of split between Yankees and Mets. And then you have obviously the Bronx and Manhattan, which tends to be more Yankees. So, that's it. So they're kind of split down the middle. And that's not like a hard and fast rule. That's just a general rule of what you'll see.
Right.
So I think what's great about both teams being good is football is ingrained in this culture. It's the only thing you could possibly see where like literally like the Giants or Jets could be on like a Super Bowl run and people are interested about like how Francisco is. Like it's naturally ingrained. I know it's very similar in Boston. It's a baseball city. It's right. And it's very similar to Chicago too. Chicago's a baseball city. So, as a matter of how good the football is doing, baseball is going to be a part of a year-long 365, conversation as far as, what's happening, right? And there's the anticipation factor. And obviously there's the day-to-day, in the season. So I think what I learned really that I didn't get as much because I was, grew up more of a football fan, but especially I learned in college, especially working in radio, more so the importance of baseball in the city, because I never lived in the city. I lived in the suburbs, which are slightly different. Suburbs are a little first in Long Island and in New York and in New Jersey. But definitely when you go into the inner boroughs, you understand how important baseball is, and basketball as well to that degree. I think from that standpoint, I really was able to have a true appreciation for what baseball means. So now when you're having two teams, to your point, I mean, I think the Mets are still a little competing with the Braves in the division, and in the Dodgers overall. And I think the Nationals will come back, and the Phillies are also going to be strong with Girardi as well. But I think they're probably going to be in the playoffs. Having two teams like the Mets and Yankees to be in the postseason is electric for this area. And it's been so long since both teams' time. So it's just the fandom in New York, and you could tell it's almost like a rumbling underneath right now. There's so much excitement for the baseball season to get started. And I think a great year in New York sports, with the fact that I think the Giants and Jets are in a down slope, but there's optimism. There's real optimism that both teams are going to be on the road to as they bring in young players and develop young players. And they really feel both teams, they have the right coaches in place with Saleh and with Judge. I know you're seeing it. The Knicks are probably more improved than they've been over the last decade. And then that's obviously are an NBA Finals contender. So the Nets have started since they moved to Brooklyn, take a share from the Knicks, but the Knicks are still really strong as far as the market. So I think it feels like basketball is on the cusp of being important again in New York. And then obviously it looks like teams are going to be competing for World Series, hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that there's a lot of excitement in New York sports, where over the last few years, there really has not been as easy or bust town, to be quite honest. There hasn't been really any other team that's been exciting. And now I think you're seeing a lot more excitement build out. So I think what Steve Cohen has done is given hope to, and Yankee fans too. I mean, Yankee fans want to see the Mets be good. It makes the rivalry better. It makes those Subway Series games in the season better. So I think, the city's encouraged now really be competitive and really being able to go after high priced free agents.
That makes sense. And it's interesting to hear sort of like a New Yorker's perspective of really like the last 20 years, because, for myself, I'm 22 years old. So I got very lucky growing up literally in the most successful sports dominance of a city that really we've ever seen. Obviously, like you brought up, like the Yankees did throughout the entire 1900s, with the amount of World Series that they were able to win. But at the same time, like, as a Patriots fan, like they were like, I would say at the start of the season, I don't know if you realize, but the AFC Championship is now a holiday, and it's a reoccurring thing where we're going to be in it. Like it's going to happen. And if you say that it's not, look at the last 17 years. And that's sort of like, I had a huge head as like a Boston fan, like you hate us because you ain't us. And, obviously now, like I have some of my friends like, oh, how you feel about the Patriots season? Like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm like, well, we need a quarterback first. Like, I can't say anything about the Patriots season until we get a quarterback first. But it must be interesting for yourself, especially somebody who, you were in sports talk radio, during when the Yankees, or close to when the Yankees were in the World Series in 2009, especially with the Giants 2007, and then the Mets and the NLCS in 2006. And so it must have been really exciting for you at that time. But I kind of want to go to transition to where you started working in the NFL, sort of close to when you got out of college. And I was curious, how were you really able to find a way to get your foot in the door in the NFL? And how do you have any advice for people who, are trying to get to that point, or trying to get in contact with, a league of that magnitude?
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate. I remember being in jobs, and I'm pretty sure it was Dave Sims, who's the play-by-play announcer for the Seattle Mariners. He's been there for the last, I think, more than a decade now, but it's been there for a lot of one of the more consummate professionals you're going to meet in sports media. It was amazing to all of us at WFUV, and just the advice he was able to give. But I remember one thing he was saying is basically, if you want a job in sports, you got to know someone and you got to be aggressive. And for whatever reason, that kind of just stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not enough that I need to do here to get a role. And I think at that time I was working in publicity for ABC, for their primetime publicity, because I knew I needed to get, some communication experience. Because my understanding of being a sports professional at 22 years old was, oh yeah, I do media, and then the other people who I PR. So that must be sports business. Like I had no clue of all the things that go into sports business. Like I just was very naive. So that was my understanding. So I'm like, great, I'll get a job. Because I think at that time, I didn't necessarily want to go pursue a career in sports talk radio or in radio in general and be kind of on the production side. And I kind of on the business side of sports. So I made that determination during my college years. And I knew with a communications background, like naturally with my experience, a natural step would be PR. So I reached out to any single league or team within 6 hours of New York. And I remember, getting various, like one of them I got was like an email from the Washington football team being like, hey, it'd be great for you potentially to come down and help us on Sundays. I'm like, they look like we're 8 Sundays in Washington. My sister lives down there. I'll drive down on like Saturday morning and whatever, just go Sunday and then come back. But like, it'd be an amazing experience for me. I was even just excited about that. And during that time period, I had also gone down to Philadelphia because the NFL PR team had kind of a network for young, people just getting out of school like yourself, and just getting ready for that next step, right? So I took the drive to Philadelphia. Luckily, back like before you had like the GPS days, so I'm like looking at MapQuest directions, which is like directions you would print out on your computer. So now I'm really dating myself. And I remember like calling my dad, like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. And he's like, no, this is where you go. So luckily he was able to get there like 5 minutes before the thing started. So it was very stressful. And then from that standpoint, handed my resume out to a bunch of different teams and league professionals as well. And before I went there, I had taken books from my executive producer, Bob Aarons at WFUV, and said, hey, can I borrow this overnight? He's like, just bring it back the next day. I'm like, no problem. So that night at 10:30 at night or whatever, I'm emailing, like I said, everyone within 6 hours. So I'd already emailed a lot of people, at the NFL as part of that. And I don't know if they just looked at it and just tried. But then I was also able to meet some of those folks too at this networking event and handed my resume to them as well. So I remember leaving Philadelphia, getting back in the car to drive back, I think, to Fordham in the Bronx. And I just remember calling my parents, be like, there's no way I'm going to get a job at the NFL. Like, this is the most competitive thing I've ever seen. Like, all these people were like, so like the dressing up for me was like wearing a bunch of khakis and like a dress shirt. And like people were in full suits and just very polished and like, and I did the same thing, obviously, but fish out of water. I'm like, there's no way I'm getting hired. Mm-hmm. I kid you not. Think about 5 days later, I get an email from the NFL being like, we'd love to interview you in a public relations role at the league. And I think I had to read the email about 5 times to make sure it was true.
Is this a prank?
I was doing sportscast at the time drive. So I'm on the computer at work at FUV reading this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, this is amazing. So I'm my boss, I'm all excited about it. Probably left. If there was one time in my life I ever left on air, that was that day. Like, I was literally walking on air the whole day. So then I go to the interview, and I think I was just the fact that I was at the NFL. I just handled the interview fine. Like, I really was nervous because I was just shocked I was even in the room. So from that standpoint, I did well in the interview. I got the job offer and started as a temp and PR for the NFL. And it's the biggest break I've ever gotten in my whole life. Obviously, Fordham University was an amazing for me as well. But getting a break at the end, I tell people all the time, like, that was my break. That was my gift I was given. And now it's like, okay, I've been given 2 gifts, WF University education and working for the NFL. And how am I going to take those 2 gifts and maximize my career in sports and media? And what kind of drives me every single day. When you're being given great opportunities, much is expected from you. And I think that's been the hardest thing in this time period where I'm looking for something new, is like, I am so to get back into the game. And now it's just trying to find a way to get back in. But I know that I stand on huge shoulders of I've worked for. And the NFL was foundational in everything that I've done in sports business. Just like FUV was, sports media was foundational. Sports business was really and being able to work with, over 10 managers that I learned so much from and really helped shape me as a business is just invaluable. And to be able to have an experience where I worked 11 seasons at the NFL, and really, I tell people that was my business school. I really sports business there. And then really to have the ability to go to 7 Super Bowls is just, I was thinking about it the other day, right before last week's, And when I was thinking last week and reflecting a little bit back on my journey, and I'm like, I can't believe I went to 7 Super Bowls. Like, who goes to 7 Super Bowls? So it's just something that people don't do. I guess somebody wins 7 Super Bowls, we know that.
Right.
But like, as far it goes to 10 of them, so maybe there is somebody more. But for me, growing up in Jersey, in a suburb of New York, with a dream to be in the industry, to be at the pinnacle of it that many times, and to contribute to making those events, it's just amazing. And I think now it's like, okay, it was an amazing chapter of my career. How do I set myself up to, to people like yourself and others to getting started in the industry? But also, how do I take this amazing opportunity that I've been given in my life and be able to do something great? And that's kind of what's keeping me driving every day, is like, I feel like I've been very fortunate in the experiences I've had, but now how do I grow on that and give back to me so much? So that's definitely what a lot of my thinking is, of what is the right opportunity for me to take the skill sets I've learned over the years and be able to drive and move forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting how, really you had this mindset of like looking around, all these people, like they're up on their pedestals with their suit and ties, and and then being able to really take advantage of the opportunity like you did at the NFL. And it's always interesting to sort of hear the stories of how did you find out. And I bet I've had a similar feeling to where Nesson, the broadcasting network for the Red Sox, I had the opportunity to be interviewed for an internship for them last summer. And, I grew up dreaming about working for that organization. And, I've felt that feeling of literally feeling like I'm floating, and just really just the overwhelming feeling of all the hard work that you put in sort of being worth it in that moment in time. And I'm curious, sort of, really, what advice do you have for people, who get that opportunity or foot in the door at sort of a company like that? Really, how did you take advantage of, the different opportunities, different experiences that you had within working for the league to really help you to be able to get up to the position of manager of marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing I did well is be adaptable and be flexible and learn as much as I can, and not want to do X, Y, or Z, but willing to do a little bit of everything, which I think that's a good thing to have. But I probably did 100% of the time, my time there, and kind of moved in directions of where naturally different rotations took me. So I went from PR, a rotational program. I kind of rotated wherever they put me, and then landed in fan strategy and marketing. And I feel very fortunate in that path, because now I have a fan-centric look at a sports industry in a time where personalization and understanding the fan has never been more important. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, you're seeing it with the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl is now a million people watching it. It was the lowest rated Super Bowl since 1969. Clearly, there needs to be work in engaging sports fans and casual sports fans. So for me to have had that of being there, and especially for 6 years focused on your generation, Generation Z, and really understanding what makes them sports, key things are they engaging with as far as growing that sports fandom and getting that emotional connection to a team, Red Sox, or to sports in general, I think is really, really important. So I feel like that's been really helpful for me to have gone through that experience. The one thing I have on the other 50% was having a North Star. I think that's so important. It's good to be flexible and just say, yeah, I'll do anything. I don't think that's a bad, really good, way to look at life, and the way to look at your role of like, I'm open, I'm willing to learn, which has always been me. I before this podcast was learning about supply chain management. Am I ever going to use that fully? I don't know, but I just have such an interest in understanding how to create efficiency and how to create leanness, right? I gravitated me towards it. So I have a natural curiosity and want to learn, but you still have to know where you're heading. Like, you can't just go through a general curiosity. You've got to have a North Star where you think that that's what separates me now from where I was, maybe even 4 or 5 years ago. Like, find a way to connect sports fans in an emotional way with teams they love. Like, I know what I want to do. You can do that through media, do that through being part of a sports team. You could do that with a sports league. But I want to bring a fan-centered approach to decision-making in the sports industry. And I don't know what the vehicle for that, but I know what I want to be able to do. So now I can evaluate every opportunity and say, is this going to lead me to my eventual goal or not? If not, then it's very easy to say no to things. A compass and a direction and a North Star that you're heading towards, it makes it very easy to say no to things, which is important. Because if not, you'll find off track and you'll look back 5 years and be like, how the hell did I land here? Right.
Right.
And I think you'll make sure that you're making decisions that's going to put you on that right. And, I feel very fortunate not only to work for the NFL, but to go a little bit off track with CBS News Digital and work in a complete different industry. I think what that did is it crystallized for me that I want to be in sports. And I think sometimes you have to do something outside of what and I had been in the NFL for 11 years, and that's kind of all I knew. So I had a real desire at that point to try something completely different. Right. And it was an amazing experience. I worked with great people. And going back to the XFL, I felt like I went back into my house. Like, it was like, oh yeah, this feels normal. This feels familiar. And I think that was really revealing for me of this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be working in sports in some capacity. Now my decision is, do I work at a league or team or a media company? And unfortunately, due to COVID, I'm probably not going to be able to make that decision. It's probably, put myself in the best, place I can be within media and leagues and teams and see what comes up positive for me. So be another chance for me to stretch and learn. But I still know where I eventually want to go. So even if I go off course, I know how to kind of bring myself back course, right? So that's very, very, very important. So that's one thing during my 11 years at the NFL. I wish I had a little bit more of a direction of where I wanted to go, but I felt I landed at the destination. I'm like, I'm at the NFL. Now I'm just like, I'll do whatever they want me to do.
Right.
And I think that's valuable in a sense, but to a limit, right? You also have to know, where do I want my career to head? To do at the NFL? What do I want to learn? What do I want to bring as far as value to the league? And I don't think I ever really went through that exercise. That's part of the reason why I'm not there. But I feel like now if I have another opportunity to be fortunate enough to, either potentially one day professional football again or working somewhere in the sports industry, right. I think always knowing how am I going to go back to creating sports fans, engaging them with sports properties, and making the industry stronger than when I found it in 2007. And unfortunately, looking at it right now in 2021, it's weaker than in 2007. So there's work for me to do because sports fans are not as big, they're not as strong, and they're not as emotionally connected. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And that's why I'm excited. It's our opportunity to get that work done and to expand the industry to a point where I took over in 2007 and my first role in the industry, surpass that and make it as successful as possible. And really the similar case I look at is the music industry. Music industry, when I was in college, was like, people were pirating music. They weren't making any money. Concerts weren't doing as well. And now look at it. It's booming. Never has before. It's making more connections with people than ever before. I mean, literally, you have a record store in your pocket for $10. It's more people have listened to more music now than probably ever in human history, and it's creating really rabid fans for artists and for types of music. So that's the model I'm looking at: is how do we take sports from where it is to where music is today? And I think there's definitely a path there, and I definitely want to be part of that solution of getting the industry there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up in that, it's cool for myself to hear somebody else, kind of reiterate something that I've been thinking about for the last 2 to 3 years within sports and predominantly baseball, just in terms of, the players marketing themselves and, the sport really trying to connect with the fans. And I actually did not know that the ratings were the lowest since what year you said, 1969 for the Super Bowl. And I think that's incredible because I looked at this matchup between Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes as, as an ideal sort of situation, a magic sort of game waiting to happen of, the old GOAT with the new GOAT. It's kind of like what people compared it to of Jordan on the Wizards against LeBron coming up with Cleveland. And I think it's interesting sort of hearing what you're saying about how the NFL really needs to connect sort of with those Gen Z sort of customers or, fan base, because, I think TikTok is a massive marketing wave that, I think a lot of companies and, leagues are really kind of ignoring about like sort of the magnitude of it. Cause, you brought it up with the music industry, and, there's so many people that had songs that, we didn't really ever hear before, but it's put on TikTok and then it gets looped billions of times, and, it's number one on the charts. And there's a lot of times where TikTok is really sort of the wave right now in terms of, short, quick content. And, people don't really have long sort of focusing time spans, and that's why baseball and football are really struggling to be able to, in my opinion, tie people in. But also because the players and really the leagues aren't sort of marketing themselves to personalize the specific fans.
Well, what you're seeing a lot in sports is there's three major elements of sports consumption that all kind of go back within each other, but it's kind of also a linear journey where you're going to casual fans through social media, and all the leagues have done a really good job of engaging casual fans through YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. It's a little different. It's a little bit more avid fan conversation, but still using social platforms to drive initial interest in the game. The issue is this: when you have an amazing song on TikTok, right? Look at the example of Fleetwood Mac Dreams, right? People your generation probably didn't even hear this song, or maybe don't know it well. All of a sudden, it becomes a top 10 song, right? Because the thing is, where you're engaging with music is $10 a month. I think you're starting to see going to HBO Max. If you make it very cheap for someone to consume your product, they're going to dive deeper and engage with it. The fact that you get a record store in your pocket for this high value. It used to be every single CD or record that you would pay is anywhere between $10 to $20. Now you're getting with the equivalent of what which would be, back in the day would be like 8 songs, right? Or even maybe double, maybe say 15 songs. You're getting a whole 40 million songs for the same. So now when you see a TikTok, everyone is also on either Apple Music or Spotify, especially your generation. Like, you're all subscribed to it, especially because there's student rates. It's like $5 a month.
Exactly. I have Apple Music.
Decision: do I want to drink water today? It's like, yes, yeah. So it makes it such an easy decision. What makes it valuable is now, okay, I sell something great, cool on social. Now let me go to Apple Music. Let me add that to my library. Let me listen to that song. Let me share it easily with my friends. Let me know, because you could do that all through your iPhone or Apple Music or Spotify, and boom, you get this music out. And it's a great way to get the conversation out. Plus, you can get free music through YouTube. So you can watch the videos, you can share that. So, and where they make their money is obviously on scale, right? They've become a mass media business. So what they've done is say, we're going to try to get as many people to buy a subscription as possible. And if we do that, that's the equivalent of what we used to sell when we used to sell records, because the equivalent was roughly people would buy 10 records a year, 10 CDs a year, $120 a year, which is what you're paying for Apple Music or Spotify. So that's the model. And they've gotten very close now to making more than they used to make on physical CD or record through distribution of digital. What's amazing with this is, what does it create? It creates raving music fans, because all of a sudden now, easier than ever to get engaged with new artists. You have 100,000 radio stations that are part of Apple Music. You can listen to them right in the platform. You have Apple Video. You have playlists. You have more ways to discover music than ever before. And a lot of those playlists are even personalized to your taste.
Right.
So you're listening to more artists. Now, guess what? Now that they're doing concerts, I don't want to just see 5 artists. I want to see 15 or 20. So now all of a sudden, I'm putting my hard-earned money to paying for concerts in their coffer, right? Now look at sports as your analogy. Same thing. Highlights. I can watch the best players in the NBA, NHL, NBA, MLB, and NFL in highlights. I get that for nothing. I can engage there. I can watch athletes tell their personal stories. The problem is you make no money on social. It's marketing any money on it. You need to drive people to watch games. Right. Now, okay, great. I just saw amazing highlights by the Knicks last night against the Heat. I'm really interested in watching coming up, on I think it's on Friday, the next one, or coming up later this week. Well, I don't have MSG. How do I get MSG? Well, I got to buy Fubo, TV, or Hulu. How much they cost? Oh, that's $65. Well, I'm your generation. I'm used to paying $10 for Apple Music, $10
Right.
for Netflix, $15 for HBO Max. I'm not watching the game. So
Right.
I'm going to continue to watch the game on YouTube, or maybe I'm just going to lose interest.
Hmm.
So the problem is the thing that connects between social and buying a ticket to a game, which is where a lot of money is made in sports, which is filling up, filling up Citi Field. That's getting older. That audience is getting older. Someone like me, who's not to date myself, but is 36 years old, I have no issue paying for YouTube TV. Great. I get to all my teams, or Fubo TV. I get all my teams. Great. I can watch
Right.
sports. It's affordable. I can stream it. Okay, I'll pay the money, right? Because I'm a big sports fan. Older, this is just the way they're used to watching sports. People younger are like, I'm not paying that.
Right.
So either you're causing pirating, which is what the music industry does, or people are just dropping out.
Hmm.
So what sports needs to figure out is how to distribute their games through video in the cheapest way possible. So I think the battle that sports has to wage over the next 10 years, and it's going to cause some pain for leagues. There's going to be layoffs. There's going to be people who lose their jobs. Like, it is what it is. But you can't distribute a product in a way that people that are younger just aren't watching it. Like, that's the problem. So when you look at the Super Bowl, there's less people that are even watching one game or two games a year, or the players don't have cable. They're just not in the ecosystem. So even though the Super Bowl is streamed on CBS All Access for $10 a month, people aren't going to pay for it.
True.
So those people are out of cable TV, and they're dropping out of the NFL fan base. So now an NFL fan base that was seeing 110 million people watch the Super Bowl, now it's 96, and 5 years from now will be 89, and 5 be 78. So it's just going to get worse and worse and worse unless the leagues do something to course correct. And that's the way music was going too. Less and less people were engaging with music.
Hmm.
It just wasn't an easy way for them to listen to music. And I shouldn't say we're engaging with it, but like, okay, I have a rock music station in my market. I have a HR, or a top 40. That's the only music I know of. Now with Apple Music, I can know indie artists. I can know,
Yep.
world, because it's all to my disposal. I can even know artists that created music in the 50s, 60s, and 70s I never heard before. So there's more of a chance for what they call a music discovery, a chance for discovery. There's more of a chance for consumption. I think what music needs to do is build a base layer. Here, for $0, you get, let's say, the broad, or get this, your major events, your major games, your major playoff games, whatever they are. If you want to be a fan of a team, maybe it's going to cost you $5 a month. If you want to be a fan of college basketball, college football, maybe that costs $30, $35 a month. But how do you take someone from an entry level, like a social media video, and how do you scale that fandom? What I always said is, how do you increase avidity for sports? And right now, because of the way it's distributed, the avidity in sports is going down. And unless that gets corrected, the industry is going to suffer. Start seeing, different business models come up to save the industry, because I think the current model now, it's just not sustainable in a personalization, a digital first mindset for younger consumers. And that's the battle that our team was kind of waging for about 3 of those 6 years I was in the group, is really figuring out, how are we providing NFL football in the most affordable way possible to the most amount of fans, and doing something like distributing on Yahoo for free on mobile devices. But how do you double down on that digital strategy to make sure that, fans that are fans of sports can watch your product for the lowest cost possible? And I think the end of the way it's currently structured just hasn't solved that business problem yet.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Kenny. I mean, I think that plan and strategy is exactly what these leagues need to start using, and hopefully, somebody from a major streaming platform, or somebody from a that would be able to bring you on and really sort of implement this strategy. I think you'd be a great asset for really anybody who's looking to get more into the digital space. And something that, like, I kind of wanted to, one of the last things that I wanted to bring up was sort of how you were able to do that with the XFL, because when you really look at the brand that the XFL had, really coming back in 2020, really, with how people really perceived it as, this WWE-esque football league. Like, what did these people think? Like, all I remember from what in the early 2000s, when they tried it before, was that these people were getting massive concussions. They didn't care about player safety. Like, what is this going to be? WWE, like, just football? And so really as league marketing director, sort of what sort of strategies did you have, or how did you try to really market to people and really sort of change their sort of mindset on what the XFL is, and really how were you able to do that during your time with the league?
Yeah, when Vince made the announcement in January of 2018, I remember talking to some business associates, some friends, some colleagues in the industry, like XFL. They're like, this thing's not going to last. There's no chance. Like, what's Vince McMahon doing here? So, because people, to your point, had of what the XFL was in 2001, which we would be the first people to agree with, that it was extremely gimmicky, right? It really wasn't about quality football. So I think what sold me on the operation initially was when Vince basically put Oliver Luck in charge of football operations. I think having Oliver as part of it, and the background he was able to build out at the NCAA and with international as well, and being able to build out American football organizations across the board, really made me feel good that this is run in the right manner. And I think his initial comments of we're going to be focused on quality football is key. And I think anytime you deal with a startup, you're always making sure that your product is quality, because I think quality is key. And it's something that's very easy, as I learned working in a startup, to lose, because everything needs to be. Like, you're literally drinking out of a fire hose every day and you're trying to keep up. And it's like, the I Love Lucy episode with like the chocolate conveyor belt. Like, that's what you feel today in a startup. Right. And I think that's something that is tough when you're in it day to day. So I think what is key, and I think everybody, the football operations, to our business operations team, to us in marketing, we're always concerned about is, are what we were producing, and is it going to be received by the fans as high quality football? And if so, we felt we were going to be successful. So I think a lot of what we were focused on is, how can we partner with people to show our fans that we are quality? And the two best partners we had were ESPN and Fox Sports. They were phenomenal. We were able to do, from a marketing standpoint, of getting awareness about the XFL out there, driving tune in and driving engagement with broadcasts. The league wouldn't be successful, ESPN or Fox. They were amazing and really led to those high TV ratings. What that allowed us to do was focus as a league on drive, because our thing was great. We have ESPN and Fox. We're going to drive viewership. We're going to have high viewership. The last thing we need is to have lousy football played in empty stadiums. We broke the organization up into two parts. One was football operations, which was Oliver, which kind of ran that piece of it. And then we had Jeffrey Pollock, who was our president. Fan engagement was all about, how are we going to get people in seats? How are we going to get fans to go to games? How are we going to build this fan base to sell tickets? So a lot of it was making sure that the marketing materials that we were building out to go against these marketing campaigns that were being led by our directors were high quality. So it was very much me partnering with the senior vice president of marketing and Scott Parker, and also our creative director and David Hilton, marketing manager, and Sean Walowski, to make sure that everything that we were doing was of the highest, even to the point where we had a conversation a month before the season started. Now, we had no field walls done, which the field walls are the walls that you remember, if you look at the Super Bowl, around the field to show branding. We had none of that done. We wanted to make sure, we literally took one designer's full month, and that's all they did was just build field walls. It's crazy. You're going to spend one person's whole time doing that. But we knew the minute you tuned in and said, this looks high quality, that win. And I remember Marcellus Wiley on Monday morning on ESPN saying, that felt big. That felt high quality. Like, we won. Because once you're getting fans and media personalities to say, even though this is an NFL type quality football, of course, it's not NFL, but saying it was high quality football, and its branding and its presentation and the way it engaged fans was also high quality, that's the whole, that's everything in business.
Right.
You can do as much marketing as you want. You could do as much promotion. If you're promoting a subpar product, it doesn't matter. It's actually you're wasting your. A lot of times people go to me for marketing services. I'm like, you're not ready for marketing. I come in on the back end, not on the front end. Like I need to come in when I know there's an extent that's worth marketing, and then it's my job to get it out to an audience. But if you have a subpar product, you're wasting money with marketing.
Right.
So I think for us, we were very, very fortunate to have had football operations people where we knew it was going to be a top quality product, and also working with amazing designers as well, to build out long team personalities and logos. And that was a lot of what my role too was, working with our team marketing directors in what are these brands going to be? What does Dallas Renegade, what does the New York Guardian represent, right? What does this represent to our fan base, and what do we want our fan bases to be? And then also letting our fans dictate what they're going to be. Like, we didn't know there was going to be DC, but let's roll with it. Okay, great. There's going to be a section of our stadium that's similar to like a black hole or to a dog pound. Let's embrace that, because that's what our fans want the product to be.
Right.
But you have a lot of families forward that don't want anyone want to be anywhere near that. Well, how do we create a separate section for them to make sure that they're enjoying the product in the way they want to enjoy it? Who wants to have 3 or 4 beers during a football game and create a beer snake and cheer loudly for their team? Let's make sure we have a section and experience for that, folks. And that was part of always what we were doing is, let's make sure we're doing a lot of social listening and understanding what the fans want this product to be. And then let's scale that. Let's bring that to as many people as we can. And then let's continue to come up with continuous improvement. And that's why I'm very much into supply now. It's like, how do you take a product as a marketer and have a lens of always doing continuous improvement? Mm-hmm. And that's what I did at the NFL as well. Yeah, we're the #1 league, but guess what? You have 100 million fans, so there's work to do. Until you have every single fan in the US, rooting for you. And then guess what? There's a whole globe out there of people that want to engage with your product. So you're never at a company like Apple. Basically, one and probably every 2 per people that walk across the street have an iPhone in their pocket, but they haven't said, okay, we're done. They're like, is there more products? Can we make the iPhone better and more convenient and more effective for our users so we can make it more valuable in their lives? So as a business, you're always on a continuing loop. And that was something that was great to be at it on kind of the mature process, like an NFL, where you're always trying to get better and you're really competing against yourself. Also doing it from a startup like the XFL, where, just like I said, getting field walls done before the season was a huge accomplishment and something to be where, for the NFL, that's standard operating procedure, right? So, right. But you got to be where you are as a business, but as long as you're moving forward and making your business better, that's the joy you get in working for a company and an organization, and definitely working in the sports industry. And that's why I mentioned before, how am I, with 13 years of and 12 of those being in sports, going to move the industry forward? And that's the exciting part of being a sports professional.
That's really interesting, sort of how you explain, how they had it in 2 sort of different sections of, football operations, and then more of sort of engaging with the fans, and really understanding how you had to like brand it correctly and also like make it sort of like how you said, high profile. And I got to be completely honest with you, you guys did an incredible job, because it was something where I was intrigued and very interested in the XFL because they were taking it seriously. And I went to a career fair last summer and got to meet people from the representatives of the XFL. And, I was very into trying to get a job with the league. And, I even have a sticker on my laptop, funny enough. And, when I bring it around, I get a lot of different comments of, oh my God, is that the XFL? That's hilarious. And now, even though the XFL, had some unfortunate sort of circumstances where, it was at this pinnacle. And then, obviously with the pandemic, with what happened with a lot of different businesses, they just weren't able to withstand sort of the impact of the pandemic. But I got to tell you, from just other people, and I bet you've had similar people say similar things to you, there's a lot of respect now for the XFL. There's a lot of respect for the product. There's a lot of respect for just the league in general. In terms of really how it was looked at the start of, quite honestly, of like a laughing stock of the NFL, of really what is this going to be? And I kind of looked at the XFL as a great idea of what could be a minor league of the NFL at some point, because I do think that the league needs that at some point. And I think it's incredible, sort of the experience that you've been able to have with these both leagues. And, Kenny, I really do appreciate you really talking about your experiences and really talking about sort of how you were able to flourish in both of these leagues today.
No, absolutely. More than happy. Really appreciate you having me on the podcast and being able to just give my experience of being in the sports industry, from being, dreaming as a young kid and just outside of New York City, to getting to, interview some amazing sports media personalities and athletes as part of my time at WA, learning and a lot about sports broadcasting and gaining a huge respect for sports talk radio broadcasting in the industry of sports media, and then having the opportunity to work 11 seasons at the preeminent organization in sports and really learning sports business from some of the most talented sports business professionals, and then being able to go to the XFL with some of the most passionate, hardworking, and amazing people I've ever worked with in my career, and just to be on a wild ride of about 7 months, which is some of the most satisfying 7 months I've ever spent in my career, in building something from scratch, to your point, that people really look now as quality and something very valuable to the sports ecosystem. And now seeing where I'm going to go next, which is exciting, to see, where to take me. But if my career ended today and this is what I put down as what I did, I take a lot of pride in what I've done. And I reflect a lot of that during this period where I've looked for my next opportunity. And like I said, a lot of it now is about, how do I give back? How do I build the industry? How do I leave the industry better off than where I did? And as we mentioned during this podcast, there are opportunities. The industry is struggling at places. It's not as strong as it was maybe 10 years ago. So I really feel now, with all able to gain within the sports industry, how can I take that knowledge and how can I first expand upon it from other industries, get smarter, and use all of that work, that hard work and effort, to make sports the number one entertainment platform in the world, and really be able to do that for vehicle I have the fortunate ability to be part of in the next step in my journey. So I definitely appreciate, Jake, the opportunity to speak with you, and I really appreciate you the very best with the podcast. But thank you so much for your time, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Kenny. I really appreciate your time as well. And, I'm really looking forward to see what your future looks like. And just from, the short period of time that we've gotten to be able to talk today, I can honestly say, like, any company would be lucky to be able to have you just within their organization.
No, really appreciate it, Jake, and definitely wish you the very best as you're looking for a first step in your career. And I'm sure you're going to be going on to great things. So definitely feel very appreciative to have gotten the chance to be on your podcast.
Appreciate that, my man. Well, everybody, I hope you have a great rest of your week and did enjoy that podcast, or that conversation, excuse me, with Kenny Pordon. And if you want to, go over to his LinkedIn, connect with him. And if you have any sort of advice, he's definitely a great person to talk to.